Why are we not hearing more about these very important topics surrounding censorship and the limitation of the First Amendment?
Well, the media is not covering it. And quite frankly, the media is one of the allies in this movement. I'm shocked to say that because I've been part of the media for 30 years as a columnist and as a legal analyst on television. But I'm shocked to say it. Part of it is because the media just doesn't report on it. It's part of losing this objectivity and neutrality from J schools as the touchstones of journalism. But
Right.
you're right, Mark. Part of the problem with free speech is it's an abstraction, right? It always loses to more concrete things. When, governments say, free speech is going to cause terrorism. I mean, people know what terrorism is. It's a car bomb going off on their street. When I speak at universities, I often ask the students if they would sell me their right of free speech. And I used to say, I'll give you $2 million. And I realized that was a mistake because $2 million is a bit of an abstraction. I got much better results when I offered $200,000. When I said 200,000, the hands would go up.
Wow.
And it's because people could envision what 200,000 is, right? It is my college education. It's a down payment on a house or a car. And the reason they have that honest response is that many of them just don't see, when was the last time I used free speech? It's the great irony of a free people that if you're a free people, you've never known the absence of freedom.
It's totally Orwellian. And then the idea of the government coercing social media to restrict certain information or the access to certain information from the citizenry is mind-boggling to me as well. Like going back to Twitter and other channels of social media now, it was uncovered in the Twitter files that the United States government, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Turley, but I think it was both the Trump administration and the Biden administration were both using social media to coerce speech to have an impact on the access to information that we, the citizenry, were able to get. I know the Hunter Biden laptop is often referenced, but it goes even beyond that. Can you paint that picture for the audience a little bit, please?
Yeah, I mean, there is one thing this book says is that there are no clean hands here. That the effort to limit speech has run rampant in both parties throughout history. It is a virus that exists within the body politics. I talk about something James Madison wrote in 1800, and Madison was one of the truly faithful framers when it came to free speech. John Adams became a terrible hypocrite. So did Jefferson. But Madison, if anything, got stronger on free speech. And he wrote a piece talking about the monster that lives within us, the monster that lives within governments of sedition, prosecutions, that this monster comes forth when we're afraid or we're angry. And the book actually talks repeatedly about how we slay Madison's monster, what we have to do to finally break from that history. And what you're left with in this history, which the book goes through all of these periods, is that there is this recurrence where every generation concludes that it's facing a unique threat and that free speech has to be the first thing to be curtailed. It's the same voices that we hear over and over again, but they pretend they're saying it for the first time. The danger is that some generation is going to believe it. And it worries me because with higher education as the font of this anti-free speech movement, we are training citizens to believe it. And we're creating a crisis of faith. They no longer have faith in free speech or the Constitution or each other. And that's the only thing that could endanger our constitutional system, is that refusal to take that leap of faith that we have historically.
Well, I don't have a lot of confidence that we're going to get there, especially because your students are willing to sell off their freedom of speech for only $200,000. I mean, that's really alarming, Professor Turley.
It is. And that's the reason I start those speeches is I try to explore with them. And I have to coax them, to be honest. And I then try to talk about why it is you just gave me your free speech rights. And in the end, I think that we do make some progress. Many of these students have been in a fairly anti-free speech environment their entire educational lives. I've had law students who have taken my class, and they've said it's the first time they've heard of some of the theories or some of the philosophers I've talked about on free speech.
Wow.
And so I think that part of what this book tries to do is to find a way of an awakening. See, there's a strange thing here, Mark, that as depressing as these periods are, the idea of monsters living within us and all of that,
Sure.
I am very optimistic in the end. And the reason is that if you believe that free speech is part of the human condition, if you believe that we cannot be completely human without free speech, then you have a certain optimism that even a massive censorship system like today might diminish the appetite for free speech, but it can't extinguish the taste for it. That if you believe we're hardwired for free speech, we can never really lose it. And that's the reason I'm optimistic. All of those speeches you talked about, Mark, where people sold me their free speech, I felt that after we spoke, that many really were less willing to make those trade-offs.
That's encouraging. It's just the fact that censorship has become so institutionalized now. When you talk about it happening in government, academia, in corporations, with the media, it's just, is this the biggest moment in time for censorship in the United States history?
I think it is. This is one of the things that the book talks about, why this is the most dangerous period. We've never seen anything like this. It was brilliant. This huge system now of academia and government and corporations. It is the largest censorship system in our history. It has been far more successful than, for example, what the Chinese have done with their Great Firewall. We have outdone them many times over. And it's through this type of censorship by surrogate. And that's one of the reasons why I think the Supreme Court made a mistake in passing on a couple of recent cases. This is an unprecedented threat. And the court had to do something it doesn't like to do, which is to sort of think outside the box, to look again at free speech protections. And in light of this new, truly existential threat to free speech.